Well, Republicans have handed President Trump an enormous injection of money to fund his immigration agenda. The big, beautiful bill includes about $170 billion in additional funding to supercharge Trump's deportation efforts and ramp up border security. Now, ICE is on pace this year to more than double the number of arrests that it made in 2024. But when you take a look at the public, sharply divided along party lines, as you can imagine, when it comes to Trump's approach on immigration. 78% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents approve of the administration's approach to immigration. Contrast that with 81% of Democrats and Democratic leaners disapprove, with 63% strongly disapproving, 9% approving. I want to bring on Susham M, immigration expert, former law professor at the University of Houston Law Center. He's also an immigration attorney with more than 14 years of experience, including serving as attorney advocate at Harvard Law School's Immigration and Refugee Clinical Program. Susham, thanks for coming on the show, and you're on the front lines of this. Why do you think there is such a difference between Republicans and Democrats? And I get it, these guys can't really agree on anything, but the divide here is pretty large. Why do you think that is?
Well, first, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here. I think there's a big difference because both sides are using political terms, but it's not accurate with what's necessarily happening on the ground. So, one of the big things, if we just take a step back, is that about over 75% of the individuals being arrested have no criminal history whatsoever. So no criminal convictions, no criminal charges, etc. Of those that are being arrested since the Trump administration took office. Historically, we've had limited law enforcement resources, and so we've targeted those individuals that have crimes that are undocumented. Now, on the other side of the equation, what a lot of the political terminology is, well, they're illegally here, so that's a crime. But that's not actually true. Immigration is civil law, not criminal law. So, for example, they don't have a right to a free attorney under the Sixth Amendment. And immigration court hearings are civil hearings, not criminal hearings. So I think the political rhetoric is what's catching people a bit off guard. And so although the arrests are up, the number of individuals with actual criminal issues aren't. And so that's why on one side of the equation, there's a lot of political terminology against criminals and illegal aliens, even though that's not accurate. On the other side of the equation, you saw this with the 5 million or so protests at the No Kings event. People are getting frustrated because they're seeing individuals with no criminal history, being raided at churches, schools, Home Depots.
Well, I guess it depends on what media you listen to or you watch, because, I don't trust the media at all, and I'm a part of it. But if you watch conservative-leaning media, they will say that 75% with no criminal charges that you produced is false. If you watch MSNBC, NBC, Democratic, liberal-leaning media, they'll sit there and say Trump's not getting people who are here illegally who have committed further crimes. He's grabbing the 75% with no criminal charges. So what is the truth? What are you seeing firsthand?
Yeah, first there was a records request from the Trump administration. So that 75% of no criminal convictions is pretty accurate because it was records from the government themselves that they had to produce. So that's what, and then the second part of that question I would say is if we look at the policies themselves, so just, even taking a step back from the statistics and just looking at the policies, there's a lot of policies that went after individuals with no criminal history. So, for example, you saw individuals going to their immigration court hearings to fight their case, but they've been raided at immigration court hearings. Now, that's limited to the last 2 years under something called expedited removal. But that is a process where people are trying to do it legally. Another one is called TPS, temporary protected status, and parole. Those are actual applications that go to USCIS, and you have to do a fingerprinting or background check with those applications. So they often have little to no criminal history in order to get approved for parole in TPS, which was taken away by the Trump administration. So the policies combined with the records requests actually help show that they are targeting individuals that can be quickly arrested, not necessarily all the priorities with individuals with criminal histories, just to up the numbers.
Talking to Susham M right now. He's an immigration expert, former law professor at the University of Houston Law Center. You know, back to your statement about being here is not illegal, but entering or re-entering the United States without being inspected and admitted by authorities is considered a federal criminal offense, and it can lead to misdemeanor or felony charges. You know, in the court of public opinion, Susham, people will say this country has a right to enforce its borders. This country has a right to let in who they want, especially when you're getting a lot of people from third world countries who are not vetted. There's no documentation of their backgrounds. The terrorist threat that's always a issue, the drugs, the human struggling. This isn't a topic that I think a lot of people are going to feel remorse for. And what I mean by saying that is, I think you're going to have a lot of people saying, look, if you're not here legally, then what right do you really have to be here?
So a few things to that. Number one, I completely agree with you. There are bad actors, right? And like, for example, the example you gave, illegal reentry after like a prior order of removal or after a previous entry. Not only could there be criminal consequences, but that's actually a permanent bar under the Immigration and Nationality Act. So they wouldn't be able to get a visa or a waiver under that circumstance. So the INA actually is pretty strict on that. The INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act, is actually strict on individuals with criminal issues. So there's something called an aggravated felony where you're just barred. There's no ability to have a waiver usually with those. So there are very strict provisions on the books. And on the second part of the vetting issue, people that go through the process legally, like in this legally and illegally is a broad term. So what I mean by that is, let's say somebody did enter illegally, but then they applied for asylum, for example. That's a right. So they're not illegal. It's a national and international right to be able to not be deported and tortured or killed. We all, I think, agree to that basic humanity, But under that circumstance, when they apply, they actually get vetted by multiple agencies. I had worked in D.C. at this large law firm a long time ago, and I was honored to work with the former director of the FBI, writing a letter to the current FBI director at the time about Iraqi security clearance delays. That was back during the during the Iraqi war. And we had U.S. translators, like translators in Iraq helping the U.S. And so they were just pending. They were out there getting attacked by al-Qaeda and under a horrible death threat. But the security clearance was taking so long to get them in the U.S. and they could be killed while they're waiting for it. So it was when I worked, the point is when I had worked on that case, you saw multiple agencies, incredibly high amount of vetting going on. And the same is true there's biometrics, it's called fingerprinting, and it goes through multiple agencies, CIA, FBI, Department of Homeland Security. So we are vetting individuals when we're catching them. Now, again, with TPS, parole, asylum, when people are applying, and those are getting tougher, by the way, the people doing it the legal way, like parole, TPS went away, asylum, the Trump administration has directed individual, not only increased application fees, but also to pre-termit, meaning like cancel those applications that they didn't put enough evidence in, and then also third-party removal orders. So like they could be deported to a third country. Right. So all those circumstances where they're already being vetted and they're applying, it's actually making it more difficult. For the individuals that haven't been caught, again, we're not prioritizing the criminals. We're actually, over 75% of them are not being prioritized. And that's a whole huge difference from not only the Biden and Obama administration, but also the Bush administration, that we're not actually using our limited law enforcement to go after the ones with the worst criminal issues.
All right, I want to ask you about that. I got to take a break real quick. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with this immigration expert, former law professor at the University of Houston Law Center.
The Bloom Daddy Show on WTAM 1100.
Talking once again to Susham M. He is an immigration expert, also an immigration attorney with more than 14 years of experience, including serving as an attorney advocate at Harvard Law School's Immigration and Refugee Clinical Program. Susham, one of my issues with this topic is the way the media distorts and lies. And I'll give you an example, and I want to get your opinion on this. Like I see all the time, Trump's hardline approach on immigration, Trump's crackdown on immigration. To me, it's not a crackdown on immigration. It's not a hardline approach to immigration. It is a hardline approach to illegal immigration or a crackdown on illegal immigration. I don't think anybody's got a problem with legal immigration. I mean, do you think Trump has a problem with legal immigration, or should that word illegal be in front of immigration when the media is talking about this?
Yeah, I would say two things. I mean, first of all, just taking another step back, you're right. I think the media distorts it to get, quick sound bites and people riled up on both sides. But second, first, the term illegal is not accurate. Like we kind of hinted toward before, immigration for the vast amount of applicants is civil law, not criminal law. So,
okay, so
they don't have a right to a free lawyer.
I should have had you do that in the beginning, because in the United States, being present without authorization is a civil violation of immigration law, not a criminal offense. What exactly does that mean in layman's terms?
Yeah, in layman's terms, it means like for the vast majority of individuals, they cannot be criminally charged with anything in terms of being undocumented.
They can't be removed, correct?
Correct, and that would be civil. That would be civil law. And then if they're here, especially more than 2 years, they're not subject to expedited removal. They're subject to like due process and having a court hearing in front of a judge if they're afraid to go back, ability to argue their case. And even if they're here less than 2 years, then they have a higher standard, but they can still apply for those things. So that's what I mean by civil law. They don't get like a free lawyer or anything like that.
But what do we? Okay, so two things here with asylum. Trump has said, and other people have said, it's too easy to use it. Like everybody says, oh, I seek asylum because back home. Blah, blah. I mean, how do we vet that? Number one, to make sure that people aren't just making it up to get here, and number two, when it comes to illegal immigration, I don't know how I forgot exactly what I wanted to say, but let's start with the first one, asylum, and I'll think. So how, is it not too easy for somebody to just claim that? Oh, I know what the other thing was. And then, as far as you mentioned the hearings and stuff, a lot of these individuals don't show. So isn't that a problem?
Okay, so a couple of responses to that. First, I actually taught asylum refugee law as a law professor, so this is near and dear to me. For asylum refugee law, it's not easy to apply. A lot of people think, okay, if you're afraid to go back, you can just apply. No, the burden is actually on the applicant to prove that they're afraid to go back, and you've got to prove multiple elements, like that they would be persecuted if they're returned, that it's based on one of 5 reasons, that they can't internally relocate to a safer area. There's multiple legal requirements for asylum. Now, one of the issues that maybe people are frustrated with asylum applicants is the processing time takes a really long time. So, you could get individuals that apply, and then you could get a work authorization while it's pending, but not have your case heard for a really long time. And so then some people think, okay, could there be frivolous cases? And there are some frivolous cases. I don't think the vast majority are not. They're legitimately afraid to go back because they went through so much just to get here. But there are some frivolous cases, and one way to tighten that up would be to actually put more funding to immigration judges and USCIS asylum officers. With the big, beautiful bill, that wasn't done. A very small amount of funding was given to immigration judges, whereas a much larger amount was given to enforcement, both to ICE officers and border. So if we really wanted to, crack down on asylum, we wouldn't have, immigration judges take 3 or 4 years on average, like, for example, in Houston, and then with USCIS asylum officers taking like 6 to 9 years. We could hire and train more officers and judges to get rid of that. And then people, wouldn't be applying for the employment authorization while it's pending. Right. But that wasn't funded. That's another misnomer there. And the other thing is, it's not easy to apply. I mean, the burden, again, is on the applicant. So, like, for example, when we take asylum cases, I mean, our amount of evidence is huge. You're talking about thousands of pages. Like, often we include, if applicable, like news articles, country condition reports, psychological evaluations. People might have been beaten or tortured, so a forensic medical evaluation, legal arguments. I mean, and that because it takes so much work, it's also, difficult to take those cases because people have to be able to afford it. And this is another problem, is those application fees. For the first time ever, you have to pay to say that you're afraid to go back, which is a bit inhumane because often people came with a shirt on their back. Maybe both their parents were killed or other family members. And then to have them apply themselves with the language barrier, with all kinds of evidence, and then, not have much finances often, is a really difficult process to go through if we just put ourselves in their shoes.
So basically everything that you've encountered, you assist individuals and businesses with a wide range of complex immigration matters. How do we get to a perfect place here to where we expedite the system to be legalized and at the same time don't create third and fourth and fifth class citizens here? Because in all honesty, a lot of these individuals are coming over here. I can't imagine living the life they live. And I think they are used and abused by the system here in a lot of different ways. So how do we balance this out to where people are coming here legally and, schools aren't being inundated, hospitals aren't being inundated, taxpayers aren't being inundated with the weight of illegal immigration?
That's a really broad question. I don't know if we have enough time, but.
2 minutes or less. I'm testing your skills here.
All right, I'll try my best. So first, there's different categories of immigration, and we need each of those categories, and we can do it in a legal, processed way. So, a broad category is employment-based, and there's both like advanced skill workers, think H-1B visas. There's a large shortage of nurses and doctors and things. So like H-1B visas, there's extraordinary ability visas, there's investor visas where they actually have to invest in the U.S. You saw that with the Trump Gold visa, but we can actually make that better, not just the amount they invest, but the number of employees they hire, like U.S. employees, and how much funding they put into it, so it makes our economy better. So that's one area, is employment-based. Another is humanitarian, like we were talking about with the asylum process and hiring more judges and officers. And then a third area, think of like student visas, DACA, the Dreamers. Both parties agree we shouldn't be deporting kids that have been here for a long time with no criminal history. So there needs to be comprehensive immigration reform, and those are some examples of how to do it, because we fulfill the needs of our economy. We're going to make our economy and companies and therefore stock market better. We're also going to be humane. That's the beacon of America and freedom. And these laws came from the genocide against Jewish people, from the Nazis. So, we're friends with Israel, but we're also humanitarians. We're the beacon of freedom around the world. I think we need to be that again. And then we need to give some discretion to these other types of cases like TPS and parole. And remember, when they go through the legal process, instead of trying to say, let's just grab everybody at Home Depot or whatnot, when they actually give them incentive to apply, they have to go through fingerprinting. They have to go through biometrics and screening. And so we're incentivizing them to not be taken advantage, but also to be vetted and screened, to your point. And those are some examples how we can make it comprehensive, make it better for the economy, and have a great world image. And just basic respect for human rights.
Susham, I've enjoyed talking to you. Next time I have you on, let's just talk about making this the best system we can. Let's spend all our time on that moving forward. I appreciate the time. Thank you.
I'm honored. Thank you. Have a good day.
That is Susham M, again, immigration expert, former law professor at the University of Houston Law Center.